OK, Michelle, for now, thank you. Well, the Prime Minister managed to change the mind of some MPs last night, but it still wasn't enough. Among those to support her was Conservative Ben Bradley, who voted down the deal in January but backed it last night. He's with us now. Why did you change your mind?
I think the circumstances have changed. We asked her to go away in January to get improvements. She did, not as much as we would like. But for me, it's about balance of risk. We ended up in a scenario in January where we had the time and the political capital to go and ask for more. Now we're in a situation where the Attorney General says the risks of us being tied in are reduced. But I think every day we go forward without an agreement to leave on the 29th, the risk of us not being able to do that increases. I think inevitably now this week we end up extending Article 50, unfortunately.
So why do you think that it went far enough and yet the advice from the Attorney General was that it didn't?
Well, I think, as I say, about balance of risk, what we asked her to go away and do was to get us a unilateral exit from the backstop. She wasn't able to do that, and the Attorney General was honest about that. But for me and 40, I think, Conservative colleagues who did change their mind, I think it was about how do we get out on the 29th of March and what is that balance of risk. I think there is a significantly reduced risk of us being tied into a backstop, but a very much now real risk of us not being able to leave on the 29th of March, extending Article 50, and I don't think that's going to be acceptable to my constituents.
Okay, and you're worried about that, of course, aren't you? Yeah. Because, you don't want a general election, do you? You're properly under the cosh.
Well, I think the whole party, whether we're marginal seats or not, if we have an election where we've... I'm very marginal, but if we have an election where we've not left the EU on the date that we promised to leave it, we're going to be in a mess. The Prime Minister, frustrating for me, the Prime Minister today I think is going to vote the opposite way to what she's been saying for the last 2 years. She's going to vote to take no deal off the table, potentially, or certainly...
So you'd rather leave without a deal than not leave at all?
Well, I think the expectation is that we leave on the 29th, and if we can't agree a deal, we do it without a deal.
But you've heard what the Chancellor said. The economy's going to be in a right pickle if that happens.
Well, the Chancellor's not exactly been glowing about it for a while, has he? But I think
but he's in charge of the purse strings.
He
knows. Presumably you think he knows what he's doing.
To an extent.
Do you
I'm not his biggest fan.
Why not?
I think there are powers at work and obviously opinions at work about Brexit that influence everybody's discussion.
So you think that the Chancellor's spring statement was influenced by politics?
Everything is influenced by Brexit at the minute, ultimately. And if we weren't in the scenario that we're in, where we're on this, we're running down to this leaving date, then politics and economics would be very different.
So you think the Prime Minister's influencing the spring statement and the comments that we heard today?
Well, I think there is very much from the Chancellor. I was hearing from Beth talking about how he's going off piece in terms of the message.
Going to come and join us in a sec.
Then clearly he doesn't know, or I don't know, frankly, what the government's position is in terms of what we do next. The Prime Minister said last night she will listen to Parliament this week, and if Parliament wants an extension, then she'll go away and seek an extension. Personally, I'd like her to step up and make a decision about what she wants to do and to lead us towards Brexit. That's what she's been promising to do for the last 2 years. But isn't she finally saying, I'll do what the House wants? I'll take guidance from the House? But
I
think the only thing that the House of Commons has a majority for in there, firstly for extension, which will happen tomorrow, but if Parliament is able to take control of this process, what we'll end up with is a softer customs union style Brexit that is against our manifesto, against what the government's been saying, and won't be acceptable to leave voters in the country. So I think
and then you'll be punished by your constituents?
We'll be in a mess, yeah.
But you personally?
Well, me personally, I won't be here if that's the case.
Okay, because?
Because my constituents won't accept it. We promised we would leave on the 29th of March. Deal or no deal, Prime Minister said no deal is better than a bad deal. I came to the conclusion that I thought we could, if we could get the deal across the line, we could at least sign and seal our leaving on that date. Unfortunately, not enough colleagues agreed with me, but we're now in a position where I'm not convinced we're going to leave on that date anymore.
Beth's going to join us and have a chat with us at the same time. Beth, you were just hearing what Mr. Bradley was saying, and he thinks that the Chancellor is being influenced by the Prime Minister, and it won't be as bad for the economy as has been suggested by the Chancellor if we don't leave on the 29th of March. Is that a fair summary of what you said?
Well, I think so. The Chancellor's been pretty doom and gloom about Brexit in many forms for a long time, hasn't he? It's not new.
I mean, part of the problem here is for MPs like Ben, who are pro-Brexit, there has been a view in government for a couple of years now, or a view from the parliamentary party at least, that he is the Remainer-in-Chief and the Treasury is skewed against a Brexit and thinks it will be really bad for the economy. That's fair, isn't it, in terms of how you feel about the Chancellor? But obviously the forecasts from the Bank of England and other institutions and the Institute of Fiscal Studies and the OBR as well suggest it will be bad for the economy. What was interesting about what you said is, did you vote for the deal last night because you are worried about a no-deal Brexit and the impact on the economy, or did you vote for May's deal just because you want to lock in March 29?
For the date, I think we're in a position electorally in my constituency. The overwhelming feedback from me is if we can't agree a deal, get us out on March the 29th regardless. That leaving on that date is the only thing that's going to be acceptable to my constituents. And I voted for the deal last night, though I don't like it, in order to ensure that we can leave on that date as we promised. You know, for most of the constituents that contact me, they would much rather now leave on the 29th with no deal than see extension and further delay and confusion.
So how do you feel about the fact the government and the Prime Minister will vote, or many in the government and the Prime Minister mainly, will vote for against a no deal tonight?
It's incredibly frustrating. We've spent the last 2 years saying that we will leave on the 120 odd times, I think she has said, we will leave on the 29th of March. And for her to not then, when it comes to the crunch, to vote for us to leave on the 29th of March is horrendous in my view.
Do you have any confidence in her, or do you think she should
well,
go?
you know my position.
There's the rub straight in there.
I put in a letter in November, so you know my views are broadly public about that. But I think we've moved beyond that now. She is there. She's not going anywhere. What I would like for her to do is to make a decision, right, and to step up and decide what she wants to do, not to stand in there and say, "Tell me, Parliament, what I need to do."
Doesn't it? I mean, I put that question to Jacob Rees-Mogg yesterday, and he said that he said exactly what you said. But then I pressed him, and he said that he has sufficient confidence in her. Do you?
There's no other option, is there, at this point in time? I've been public about my view that I don't think she's taking this in the right direction, but there's nothing at this point we can do about it. What I need is for her to make a decision about whether she is delivering this thing as she's promised to do, and if she's not going to do that, then you know we're going to be politically in a big mess, actually.
You seem very deflated and downhearted by the whole thing.
I am, bluntly. You know, from a purely selfish, political, personal point of view, this week and this next few weeks will decide the longevity of my career, frankly. So it's a pretty stressful time. I'm trying to be pragmatic, and I voted last night to make a hell of a lot of compromises, actually, on what I would ideally like to see, but to get something through that allows us to deliver on the promise that we've made. And now that that has not happened, I think the inevitability this week is that the Prime Minister gets sent back to seek an extension.
Okay.
Just one more thing, Ben Bradley. I mean, just in terms of where you're at, you're sitting in Mansfield in a marginal seat. You're the first ever Conservative in that seat, and you've got Brexiteer colleagues in there in safe seats. Doesn't matter if there's an election, who cares? They are never going to be ousted from Parliament. You must hold them to blame rather than the Prime Minister, don't you?
I think there is a problem within Parliament as a whole, and there are those interests. You know, there are people who have held very strong views for a long time, and I'm not going to have a go at people who have been consistent in wanting to leave the EU in a certain way for decades and decades before I was here. But I do think that there needs to be an awful lot on both sides of pragmatism at this point, that if Parliament is not going to accept, and frankly it's not going to accept, a no-deal scenario, then how do we get this through? Because actually, I held my nose and voted for a deal that I don't like in order to get this done and move on, which I think broadly is what the country wants us to do. Okay. If people are just going to hold out, then that's not going to happen.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. We have continuing coverage of events here at Sky.